Welcome to the Good News Bay podcast, where we are making Bay County brighter one conversation at a time. Today has been a treat. It's also been a learning experience for me. I'm fascinated really by the transit system and how goods get from one place to the other.
Right.
Never gotten to look a whole lot at the port side of things, but today we have as our guest Alex King, who is, I want to make sure I get your title right. You're over the Port of Panama City. I guess you're the director of the Port.
Director of the Port, yes.
And you've served in a number of different roles.
I have.
Learned a lot of different parts of it and kind of worked your way up to that. We'll talk a little bit about how you got into the port side of things here in just a couple of minutes. But I think it's important for people to know that you live here in Lynn Haven.
Yes.
You have a wife named Laura who actually is also an educator with my wife at Bay Haven.
That's right.
Here locally, you've got two daughters.
Yes.
That are involved in the school system here locally as well. And so I hadn't asked you this off air, but we were here during the hurricane. I understand you survived the hurricane.
Yes, we did.
And had to rebuild afterwards.
We did.
Which means you've experienced some of the same struggles that the rest of us have. We don't shun anybody that wasn't here during the hurricane because there's a lot of new folks. But we talked even about that time, like it's going to be those that were here before Michael and those that are here after, because there's something unique about walking through that.
It is. It is. It did show how resilient this community is.
Yes.
And but that was a very hard time for a lot of people. And so being here and being with the people that were here through Michael, everybody has a commonality.
Well, Alex, one of the things that it shows, I think, is that your tenure with the port and having to lead through that period of time. We talk a lot about entrepreneurship and leadership, and it gives, in my view, it gives a little bit extra credibility going in, knowing that you have had to lead in and through a hurricane and a pandemic, et cetera. Now, before we get into all the amazing stuff that's happening now, we're going to get into some of that.
Oh, yeah.
You brought an amazing picture here that says so much, and I think I not only want to look at this, but I want you to talk a little bit as we kind of gaze at this. Talk to us about, you may have something you want to say about the picture first, but I want you to be able to tell the story about how you got into this whole idea of cargo and ships and railways. Talk to us about who you are and how you got into this.
Pictures can tell you a lot, and there's a lot of stories to tell in that picture. But I did want to start. That picture is just kind of a glimpse of a modern port operation, and it's amazing to see that this is right here in Panama City, in Bay County, and it's serving our customers all throughout this region in the southeast. And it just shows how far the port has come in the decades since the Port Authority was established to have that type of modern equipment here and to provide those services. What it also says is this is a picture of our container terminal. And it also shows a little bit of how I got introduced to the seaport industry. And, growing up, there were two main interests. There was music and trains. And in ninth grade, I had the opportunity or the pleasure to be introduced to a gentleman named Malcolm McLean. And he just drove up to our home one Sunday afternoon to see my stepfather, who's a veterinarian, and about a dog. And he invited us for dinner.
Okay.
And so we went over that evening and went to his home and walked in and saw, a picture of a container ship, much like this one. Saw pictures of container terminals, sea land, and it was just something was going through my mind about, wow, something is here, something, And he had excused himself, and my stepfather said, Alec, do you know Malcolm McLean? And I said, yes, this is amazing. He said, well, sea land? I said, yes. He said, well, that's his company. And he said, he invented the container. It just all came together at that moment. And so it was really just an amazing introduction to the industry.
So these containers that we see on 18-wheelers, we see them on the ships.
He invented those.
Okay.
And it's just amazing the impact that he made on my life to know of not just being in just the rail industry, but global transportation. The whole world revolved. I mean, you look at the efficiencies of what containerized freight introduced to where you could load garments at a factory in another part of the world and ship it direct to a store in another country and never touch that cargo. And it's just it allowed efficiencies, quality, more efficient, and that's where the world is moving.
So that conversation took your mind from being perhaps an engineer over a train,
Yes,
to saying, okay, this is going to be a global like it's a lot bigger than what I thought it was.
Yes,
That's awesome.
and it opened my eyes to the
Now,
opportunities.
I think it's fair to say that years ago, you actually were involved with Bayline, or the company that owned Bayline.
I was.
So you've got a background in the rail system, in addition to your experience now at the port.
Yes, and that was 10 wonderful years. 10 years of learning the rail industry inside and out. Being able to work with a company that took over lines from major railroads where they may not have been deemed as profitable and make them profitable.
Well, as we walk through what they do at the port, one of the things that's been neat to me to see, and we literally talked about some of the people that you work pretty closely with that have different roles in this whole process of industry that comes to Bay County and the region, because I've always, like growing up here, I've always heard about the Panama City port, the Panama City port. Well, you hear Panama City, you don't think regional, but it has to be regional. It is regional, and it's becoming, I don't know if global is the right word, but more that. And so, in light of all that, like when we're looking at where these ships come from and where they go to, and how the cargo gets here, the rail side is one of the ways that products get here, right?
Yes.
And then you've got 18-wheelers.
Yes.
And then planes are a part of it. And then obviously it goes from here on ship to wherever it's going.
That's right.
And things probably come to here on ship and then use those same modes to wherever they go, right?
They do. It's a true intermodal connectivity with our port and the transportation systems in Bay County and Northwest Florida to reach our customers throughout the U.S.
We've talked a lot. We did a pre-interview, and in that process, we talked about the growth in our community with those different modes. I mean, the railroad's been here as long as I can remember.
Right.
But when I was growing up, I grew up across from the old airport, and we couldn't get the big planes in and out of here. But the airport moving like it has and having the bigger runway has opened up opportunities for the port, correct?
It is long term. It really is. It's going to attract. When you look at the type of industry that's going to be attracted to the airport, the aircraft maintenance, repair, and overhaul, other industries, and you look at nearshoring, where you have companies that are building these components that are going to be needed at these plants. The port in the future could have an opportunity to play a role of helping import those goods or export those goods to maintain those planes.
It's incredible that all these little pieces fit together. I know that those that are involved, Parker McClellan at the Airport Authority, you've got Becca Harden, who's the Bay Economic Development Alliance Director, Jennifer Conley, that's with Florida's Great Northwest. All of these are people that are a part of helping recruit new customers.
Right.
And if the company needs multiple modalities, I guess that's the way. Is that the right way to say it?
That's a good word.
This may be new in my vocabulary as we move forward, but they're going to need that here. And what's cool is that, like, again, in my lifetime, when you look at where the hurricane evacuation routes are and the improvements with that, well, those have gone from 2-lane roads to 4 or 6, depending on which road. We were talking a little bit about Alabama and Columbus, Georgia earlier. And I remember as a child going to my grandparents in Columbus on a 2-lane road. And then it became 4-lane, and there's always cones and sections that are being upgraded. Well, all of those corridors have gotten better, and that's good for the port.
It is. And that, the connectivity, what I refer to as connectivity off dock, is extremely important because, or last mile. But when you can have a very efficient port, but you need to be able to get that cargo off the port quickly and to the destination.
So let's give them an example. Can we talk about wood pellets for a minute?
Absolutely, we can.
Where do we get those wood pellets from?
So the wood pellets come from Jackson County in Cottondale, and there's a big wood pellet plant that was built there in 2007, 2008. And at the time, it was the world's largest wood pellet plant. Okay. And so what they do is they take pine timber, and they manufacture, not manufacture, but they convert those logs into pellets.
Okay.
And the bay line, and they load into rail cars, and the bay line moves that to the port.
You said these are not the pellets that we would put in our grill.
No, do not put these in your grill. So these are pine pellets.
Yep.
That's used for energy generation, power generation. And so what you have done is you have leveraged the regional transportation corridor
Yep.
and to use all rail.
Yep.
To take trucks off the road.
Yep.
And to use heavy haul rail to the port and single line service. And so it operates just like a Swiss watch. Every morning between 5 and 7 a.m., that train comes into the port. And the same schedule, 7 days a week.
Now, y'all been doing the wood pellets, you said 2007, 2008?
2008 is when we started exporting wood pellets.
Now, I tried to do my best to do my homework, and I know that you wanted to increase capacity.
Yes.
And so I thought about doing a quiz and like putting a poll out there and saying, hey, share with us what you think that big white igloo looking thing is at the port. Do you think it's an observatory?
Oh, yeah.
Just like the ones that I saw on some mountains
Right.
in Hawaii, right? Is it a giant golf ball? Is this Epcot? No, it's increased our capacity to move wood pellets, right?
It is. That is a biomass storage dome. And that is built specifically to
say that again.
Biomass
storage
dome.
So the next time you go to the island, right, you put in there at the park and you run out under the big bridge and you see that dome. You can tell your friends it's the biomass
storage dome.
Now you know.
And it will hold 20,000 tons of wood pellets.
Okay.
So we will be able to hold 50,000 tons of wood pellets at any given time on the port to load on ships.
So they'll bring a ship in and I guess begin to load it on. How long does it take to load a ship with pellets like
3
that?
3 days.
Wow. Cool.
3 days. 30,000 tons in 3 days.
So can we give them another example?
Yes.
We were talking about the roads up to and from Georgia. There's we do a lot with copper, right?
Yes, we do. We are the largest import port for copper coming into the United States.
I don't think they knew that.
And the copper comes in from Chile and Peru and goes to the largest consumer in Carrollton, Georgia. It's about a 4.5-hour transit, and we load 50,000 pounds of copper on a truck. And that's a very, very expensive commodity that's going up. So they make it up there in about 4.5 hours. Trucks come back and load again. So we're like a conveyor belt, storage and then conveyor belt to service that plant.
Or is the copper go into those kind of containers?
So we get copper 2 ways. We get it in ships in what they call break bulk, where when it's each copper cathode or 2.5-ton bundle is stacked in the ship. And we also do get some in containers. Wow. And all coming from Chile and Peru.
So one of the things that I read up on when I was done, I'm going to keep this note going. I did my homework.
You did.
My assistant Jennifer helped me some with this, but when one of the phrases relative to the port is that it's the gateway to the Southeast. Did I say that right?
Yes, we're a local port with a global reach in the Southeast. Yes.
And I think when we keep talking about the regional really impact that we have that has very, very local benefits, but also regionally. It was fascinating because as I was reading, we do an awful lot in the Southeast, particularly with Georgia, Alabama, the Carolinas.
Yes.
And if they have goods that they want to get anywhere in the kind of the South America area, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but stay in the Gulf.
Right.
We have an advantage as a local port because we're probably the closest port and deepest port, best port. We were obviously the best port.
We are the best port.
Yeah, we are the best port. But it's a shorter route generally to get to the port of Panama City.
It is. We have to. So being a regional port, you have to work harder and you have to work smarter, and you have to be very responsive to your customers. And so we look at ourselves as a very flexible port for steamship lines that want to stay in the Gulf of Mexico and not go around up to the East Coast. And so we service regional steamship carriers that are in these north-south trades and that bring these goods in from South America, Central America, going to Central America, and also Mexico with our high-capacity container trade, which is in this picture, from the Yucatan region of Mexico.
What did you said? High-capacity container trade?
Trade, yes. And so we bring in, I will say this real quickly.
Yeah.
But when you look at what it comes from Mexico into the U.S., a lot of goods, as we all know, vehicles, machinery, garments. But through our port, you may have LL Bean garments coming through the port, Gap, Vanity Fair, a lot of fresh produce coming in. So I'll never miss an opportunity that if in the fall and winter of the year,
Yeah.
go to Aldi and buy cucumbers because they came through our port. We
Really?
do a lot of cucumbers through Panama City. We also do fresh Gulf seafood, believe it or not, through Panama City.
Really?
All coming in refrigerated containers.
It's amazing.
And so we do, and also seats for like tractors and Harley motorcycles
Right.
come through the port. So a lot of neat things come in these containers that you may not realize, but you're either using or consuming on a daily basis.
So talk to me a little bit about the employment side of things.
Yes.
There is a big impact locally and then probably regionally on jobs because of the activity that comes through here. I mean, it's obviously increased. I think I read somewhere we were talking about like 1,300 jobs that are direct jobs and 7,700 user-related jobs. That's a lot of impact. What do those terms mean?
It is, and that's a really good question. So our port, we look at our port from what kind of impact do we have on our community and our region. And so of those jobs, over 10,000 jobs are supported either directly or indirectly by the port's maritime activity.
Okay.
And so you have 75 Port Authority employees that are there on the port every day, employed by the Port Authority, that are handling cargo, that are taking care of our customers, taking care of the administrative functions of the port. And then you also have the employees of like Berg Pipe, Oceaneering, large industries that are located on the port. The stevedores, the longshoremen that work very hard day in and day out loading and unloading those ships of the cargo and goods that come through the port. And then you have the railroad employees, the truck lines. It trickles down. You have the people that work at the maintenance facilities, the service providers to the port and the companies that are on the port. All of those jobs are because of the port's maritime activity. So when you look at investing in that port, expanding that port, modernizing that port, is to not only protect the jobs that are there, but to create new jobs. You want to be able to have those jobs for the people that live, work, and play in Bay County. And you want to create jobs in the future for the families that are here today, having those children. When they grow up, they need to come back and have good jobs in Bay County.
Well, and it's, I think sometimes we forget this. I think particularly as locals, we forget this because the idea is that we want our kids to be able to grow up here and have good paying jobs.
Yes.
We'd love for our grandkids to be close, all those things. But there's a cost for that.
Yes.
There's things that has to happen. There's got to be economic activity for there to be jobs for our children to have that are the quote higher paying jobs.
Right.
And so as we're talking about these different parts to a regional team that is recruiting businesses from all over the world to come to Panama City, like this is the necessary requirement for us as locals to have those dreams of higher paying jobs in Bay County being here, right?
It is.
Speak a little bit to the increase that's required to, because you were talking about the fact that what we are like where we're at today, in order to be able to maintain that, in order to be able to keep those jobs and increase more, the volume has to increase, right?
Yes, and that's a really good point. Ports are constantly planning for expansion. These seaport projects, what we do here as a port, when you're talking about building new berths for ships to come in, to deepen the channels for bigger ships, to support your customers, to make sure you have the right equipment, the right infrastructure to support their growth over time. Those are long-term investments that they carry 50-year lifespans on the seaport infrastructure. And it may take 2 or 3 years to plan and then a year or two more to construct. And so you're constantly planning way out. What I'm doing today and what looking at as a port staff and where we're planning for the future, that very well could be something that benefits the next generation.
Right.
But that port, our port is critical that we keep expanding because we're handling 2 million tons of cargo today.
Wow.
That's a great number. Considering in the early 2000s, the port was handling about 400,000 tons. But in 5 years, we need to be well past that mark. And so we are constantly striving today to increase tonnage, to increase funding for these infrastructure projects, because as we all know, things are cost more to build now than they did 10 or 15 years ago.
They do.
And so we have to be able to do that.
One of the things I want to, if you'll let me put a feather in your cap, I want to do that because in August, the Bay County Chamber of Commerce made rightfully was they were going to brag on you, and the reason they did is because you were selected to be in a council position, and you're going to have to give me the name of but you're over basically council of the 16 ports in the state of Florida. Is that right?
That you are, and that's a really good point. And that's the FSTED Council, which is Florida does not have a state port authority, whereas our neighbors to the east and west, like Alabama, Georgia, they have a state port authority because they may have 1 or 2 deep water ports. And so, with 16 unique ports in the state of Florida, that's 16 port authorities, and each port is in its unique position to serve the cargo needs and the people needs of our state, from cruise to cargo handling to space, to luxury yachts. And it's amazing to see the effort that's gone into those ports. Well, the FSTED Council has a fiduciary responsibility to appropriate the funding that comes from the FDOT annually for the seaports among projects that are competitively applied for. And so we apply for these state seaport grants, and then we use that to match income from the ports to build those projects.
I have to tell you, I love seeing those that are a part of and from our area representing the state as a whole and excelling in such a way, because literally what this tells us is that you have knowledge of and have been viewed by peers. We're the best port in the state of Florida that's got more ports than most of the other states, right? But you're actually, you're very well aware of what's going on in other places. Sometimes I think when people look in our community, we're not perfect at everything, right? And so I think there's not the natural tendency to say, hey, we're excelling in this in our state. Like, we're doing an excellent job. You talked earlier about resiliency, and we talked a little bit about the hurricane. I think that has kind of built into us some experiences that put us next level. So I'm grateful to know that at a state level, even, that we're doing an excellent job, and we're not like behind what others. We're actually ahead of where a lot of the other. And I'm bragging, not you. Those were my words, and not yours.
It's good. It's amazing to see the investment and the support from the state, and I think that's critical. And being on the FSTED Council, I'll just have to say this: is I'm fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of very, very smart people, and people that are a lot smarter than I am, because they serve as mentors.
Yep.
And they also, everybody has the same mission and goals to develop these modern port facilities and grab as much trade is to come through Florida, and also to support the growth of Florida.
I need to be a little more of a teammate right here, because the truth is, now here's the deal. Just like we're saying that regionally there's an impact, as a state, you're telling me that the different port directors in the state are working together to do as much economically as we can for our state, and I would assume as a nation, to get more gross domestic product. Would that be the right term?
Yes, and get more growth, get more cargo, bring it through Florida. Bring what is coming to Florida through Florida.
So more for the nation, more for the state, more for the city. All of those things make it better for everybody. Yes. I have a saying that I've picked up that was somebody else's before mine, that a rising tide floats all boats. I guess this is a good time to use that.
It is.
But I think it works. How long is there a term for this role with the council?
It's a 2-year term.
Okay. Well, we're proud of you.
Looking really forward to the next 2 years. So really new into the position, but looking forward to it.
Well, the other thing, I don't know if I fully made this point, but when we were talking about the southeast side, the gateway kind of to from the southeast area, a lot of these things you were talking about them going towards Mexico, that kind of deal. It's pretty neat to me to actually hear and see where things are coming from and where they're going to.
Right.
And I know that the efficiencies there. Let's talk about a couple of different. We're going to kind of shift gears and look towards the future. And literally, I think decisions that were made in the past probably benefit us now.
Yes.
Before West Rock actually closed, before the paper mill closed, there was a purchase of a property that has now or is becoming the East Terminal.
Right.
Tell us what that is.
No, this is a really, really good point. And I think in 10 to 20 years, the community is going to be looking back. You look back at the history of the port, and that transaction and that purchase for the port expansion to grow and develop the East Terminal is going to be one of the more pivotal points in the port's history. And that was a decade-long process.
Right.
And so when you talk about planning for the future, but with our main terminal being pretty well at capacity and needing to grow, at the time, West Rock was also needing to be able to have more modern facilities in deeper water, because the largest ships that call this harbor called at that terminal. So the Port Authority was able to work with WestRock to purchase that private deepwater marine terminal that was owned by WestRock, and then poured $66 million into the modernization and rebuild of that terminal.
Wow.
While WestRock was still in operation.
So the Port of Panama City did that.
Yes. And so
it's a big investment.
It is. It's a big investment that took a lot of time. You look at, you look at what the Port Authority staff and board did to make that happen is just phenomenal. And you look at the growth to secure that funding. You look at working with the Corps of Engineers to get that channel deepened, to gather the support on the local, the state, and the federal level, and from the private sector to make that happen is nothing short of amazing. And so now you have 70 acres of port terminal development for the next generation. Now, we will need more, but that's going to help you achieve those higher tonnage numbers where if you were still at the 100 acres here at the West Terminal, you would get to a certain level where you couldn't grow anymore.
Right.
And you would be okay for a while, but over time, your port activity would be less.
You told me that the trend is for boats to be getting bigger.
They are getting bigger, and we've seen that. You can look at it when you see every day for, like for instance, with wood pellets. We used to load 25,000 tons of pellets on a ship. Now we're loading 30,000 tons plus. We load 38,000. So bigger. They're sending in bigger ships, incrementally bigger ships. You're looking at what's calling at our East Terminal. We were doing 650, 680, now over 700-foot long ships. So you need to make sure that you have the facilities to support them and the deeper water. And that is what every port, every deep water port on every coast in the U.S. is investing, is to handle bigger ships, because naturally just over time they're getting bigger.
So there'll be bigger ships and probably fewer ports?
Yes.
Which means you better be the best port.
Yeah, we got to be the best port. We got to be at the front of the line saying, come on.
You can't just rest on your laurels and stay where you're at. You got to keep getting better.
That's right. And it's pushing these ports to invest to stay viable and stay growing.
Yeah.
So they can stay at the table. They need to have a seat at that table.
Well, and I'm going to keep pounding the message. We got these different modalities now because we've got rail, we got 4-lane, 6-lane highways coming in. We've got a bigger airport now that's got space, industrial space, in case there's some industry out there that needs a port to call.
That's right.
We've got the ability to do so, and we're competitive with it. As you also begin, I want to get my terminology right.
Okay, right.
Because it's not just the Port of Panama City that's out there by the Hathaway Bridge. Now that's kind of going to be that's the West Terminal.
Terminal, yes.
And then where WestRock used to be is now becoming the East Terminal.
East Terminal, yes.
Well, let's shift from that and talk about a inland distribution center.
Yes.
And there's a piece of property. Is it a couple hundred acres that you guys have up 231?
It is. It's our intermodal distribution center. And it's
say that again.
Intermodal distribution center.
They're learning all kind of new vocab.
And it is connected by rail from both terminals and by major highway freight corridors. So it's on US 231, right as you're coming into Panama City on the north end of town. And it's very strategically located to, you can be very quickly up to I-10 or into Alabama and up to I-65, I-185 in Georgia. And it is it is land that is zoned heavy industry and pad ready to attract industries to Bay County that are going to need, that will utilize the port to import or export the commodities that they need.
Well, I want to stop you just for a second. We're both dads, and I like helping dads, and I'll probably do this with my kids at some point when I have them in the car, even though they're both grown. We'll be riding down 231, and I'm going to point off, and I'm going to say, hey, guys, because I like to show them that I have a lot of knowledge. That's the intermodal distribution center.
That's right.
And that is important to the economy of Bay County.
Yes.
And the region.
That's right.
So is that space going to help us with the efficiency, and I forget the terminology, of basically getting it from the ship to the location that it's got to go to?
Yes, it creates port capacity so that when you have cargo coming into the port, you can move it off the port quicker to areas at the intermodal distribution center to perform consolidation or transloads.
Yep.
Also for commodities coming in, you can transfer it from rail to container or into warehouses and then bring to the port to on a ship.
Essentially, kind of what you're saying is that our ability to increase capacity, if we've only got so much waterfront property, I mean, that's high dollar stuff.
Yes, it is.
So you better have some place to get that stuff off the waterfront and inland. So, because I mean, everything else is you got other people that are using that same waterfront property or different spaces for pleasure, et cetera.
No, you're right, and you see a lot of big ports are really, really helping to develop this inland port mode of this inland port mode. You look at what the Georgia Ports Authority are doing; they're setting up multiple inland ports to increase the velocity of cargo moving off their docks. Alabama's doing the same thing. So we have our model, and Florida's looking at it very aggressively as well.
I think this is exciting. So we're modernizing the infrastructure. We've got a new terminal coming in, or it is in the process, which is going to increase capacity. The continued development of the intermodal distribution center off 231 is going to help. All of these, I'm kind of giving you the answer, I think, but all these are telling us why the best is yet to come.
That's right.
For the Port of Panama City.
That's right. And it's more growth. You know, it's more growth, more cargo, more jobs, higher impact.
Okay.
And that's the goal for the port long term. More jobs, more cargo, higher impact.
Alex, do you see the best days in front of us?
Yes.
At the port?
Yes.
That's awesome.
And we've had some mighty good ones.
We have had some good ones.
We have.
Listen, I appreciate you being our guest. I promised you a lightning round, so I just want
to. Yes, you did.
You're a boating guy like me, so let me talk food for a second.
Let's do it.
Are you steak or fish?
Fish.
All right. Do you like your fish grilled or fried?
Oh, I love it both ways, but I love to grill it.
All right, that's good. You probably have some special seasonings to go with that. Do you prefer, when you fish, you prefer freshwater or saltwater?
Saltwater.
All right. Do you prefer inland fishing or offshore fishing?
Offshore.
All right. You'll do either, though, won't you?
Oh, I will. All right. Love a good inland morning, too.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, listen, I hate it. I didn't tell him that you're an Auburn fan, but you graduated. But your bride is don't hate him if you're Alabama, because he married an Alabama fan.
That's right. I married up, as they say.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm grateful that you have invested so much of your life here in Bay County and have been here during this time. Looking forward to what God's going to do.
Thank you.
Through your time continuing at the port. Thank you for being our guest today.
I appreciate it, and we're grateful for this community and the never-ending support.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us for the Good News Bay podcast, where we are making Bay County brighter one conversation at a time. Please help us share this good news and change the conversation by liking, sharing, and subscribing to the podcast.